Okay, Eric, how are you? It's wonderful to see you.
Yeah, it's wonderful to see you as well. Yeah,
How are you doing? You're on the Upper West Side, right?
right. Upper West Side, New York City. That's right.
And
Yeah,
I'm
no,
calling
of
you.
course, like every place else, it's been a very rough several months, but
Yeah,
little by little, our city is getting back together, and never know what's going to happen in the future, but at least as of today, things are fine. Oh,
right.
fine. They're getting better. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've been up. Yeah, I've been up in New York a couple of times over the last week or two, and definitely I've noticed over the last few weeks traffic starting to build up again,
That's right.
which
Exactly.
is unfortunate. It's been nice to just cruise through Lincoln Tunnel and drive through
For sure.
Midtown, and yeah,
Right.
more
Right.
than usual.
Yeah.
So, well, all right, a couple of questions for you.
All right.
Um, I guess, well, we'll just launch right into it. So you studied with Sam Adler and Gunther Schuller also, I see, right?
Yeah, those are two of my teachers. Absolutely. Yeah.
So who would you say might have been? Uh, I mean, it's impossible to choose just one person, but if you had to pick someone who was particularly influential on you as a musician, or maybe even in life. Um,
Well, first of all, as a musician, well, number one, I'm a teacher as well, and so I've appreciated what I got from all the teachers, and it was really nice at Eastman where got my undergraduate, because there, the composers, each year you study with a different teacher, which is great because in composition there's so many different musical styles available, in the 20th, 21st centuries now. And so by having all that variety, it was great. And it's a little bit different when you have a piano teacher. You learn a very specific technique, and then,
right,
then it
school
takes
of
a while
playing.
to develop that, right? Whereas with composition, sometimes it's nice to get this array of different approaches. So I'm not avoiding the question by
Right.
picking just one, but if I would have to say my very first composition teacher, which was actually Joseph Schwantner, and he won, his great Pulitzer Prize. I mean, he was one of those composers in the early 70s that was kind of in the lines of George Crumb, loving all the different kinds of colors and sonorities, and it was fascinating. But from each composer, got a different thing. From him, colors. From Sam Adler, wonderful approach towards form and structure. From my teacher, Milton Babbitt, who I studied with for 4 years at
So Juilliard.
Juilliard, yeah,
Yeah.
and had never studied 12th tone before, and so I figured I'm going to be teaching this, and I really wanted to find out what it was all about. And it was fascinating, even though stylistically my music is so different than what Mr. Babbitt's was, but still he gave me that appreciation for individual moments, about how each don't take anything for granted,
Mhm.
and so it was nice having that array of teachers.
Well, I would think Babbitt and Crumb, in a sense, this sharp focus on the moment. Uh,
That's true. That is true, right? What you're hearing, and yeah, and the sonic idea. It was fascinating. Yeah.
I was just reading last night that one of my favorite composers actually just passed away on Monday, Ennio Morricone.
Oh,
You
sure.
might know
Yeah.
the
Film composer too. Yeah.
great film composer.
Yeah.
And one of the trademarks of his style was just this chameleon-like character where he could make thousands of different sounds and colors and use all sorts of instruments, crazy instruments, just things you pick up and bang on, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
this idea of
And
this
still, it was always beautiful.
yeah. But I
Yeah.
think, when I think about your music, which I've heard played quite often, I've had it in my program at Penn, had, trios played and
Oh, I appreciate
brass
that so
quartet.
much.
I think of it as a very rich, if I had to pick one characteristic, rich kind of warm, sonorous sound that you go for. Not just because of the brass instrument aspect, but just an interest in these kind of warm, open harmonies. Does that make sense? Or
Sure, absolutely. And for me, it's also going to yet another teacher that I studied with, Warren Benson, to flatter the sounds of an individual instrument and what they can do. And when you get certain types of sonorities, for example, I've written so much for brass, and when they get that resonance with open fifths and as I said, certain kind of resonances, and just letting them sing. And that's what I enjoy doing. Yeah.
There's at the University Museum here at the University of Pennsylvania has this huge room, this round, they call it the Chinese Rotunda. It has the third largest crystal ball in the world in it. And I saw a demonstration there. They brought a trumpet player, and he played, he might have played taps even or something. And just the way that talk about these fifths and the fourths and these octaves, and the room has a resonance of, I think about, something huge long, like 7-second resonance. And he played this long, slow brass piece, and it felt like you were in the, in the belly of the whale. The whole room just vibrated and resonated. It was incredible, and that's something that I feel with your music. Even in the fast movements, there's always this sense of resonance, actually, which is beautiful.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a sonic enjoyment for the listener. Absolutely.
Now, tell me about, so I associate your music with brass.
Yes.
Were you a brass player, or did you come from piano background and just kind of fall into brass, or what's
how that all came about?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry about that.
That's okay. No, it's good. It's good to be back here. So you were saying, I was asking you how your brass background or not background. You mentioned something about a bugle. Is that right?
That I own. That's but I can't play it. Yeah, it just hangs on my wall, But I went to Eastman School of Music as an undergraduate, and there at Eastman, they have a very important and a great history of wind instruments. The Eastman Wind Ensemble was very famous, and the Eastman Brass Quintet. And so those instruments were looking for repertoire. Brass Quintet is not that old. It's really only since the 1950s that started. I mean, compare that to a string quartet. And so they were looking for repertoire, and there's the brightness of the sound. I thought, wow, this would be great, to write several pieces. Now I write for everything. I mean, strings. Well, for the piece I'm writing for your festival, that's the with the string quartet. The instrument that I played,
quartet and tuba.
And yeah, with tuba and string quartet plus tuba, I used to play cello. That was the instrument I played.
Okay.
So that describes a little bit my interest in some of the lower instruments, that has that rich, deep sound. So writing for tuba, I just love that. So when I write for an individual instrument, whatever it's for, but specifically brass, the resonance is wonderful. And again, to flatter the sounds of the instruments, to make it sing, and that tuba does not have to just do the pa pum pa pa, no, they want to sing too. And so myself, and I'm not the only one, more and more composers, started writing a lot for these instruments to help now build their build their repertoire.
Right. Well, as a violist, of course, we're the bastard child of the violin or the strings family.
Exactly, and there's no reason it can't have these great. I mean, you listen to the Bartok Concerto, the Walton. I mean, it's like there's amazing, great repertoire there, and yet, yeah, sometimes you go for the high instrument. That's the violin or whatnot. So one way or another, that's it's important for composers, I think, to explore all these instruments that deserve repertoire.
Well, I think of Hindemith, right, in particular, who. Is there any instrument that Hindemith didn't write for, right? In fact, maybe even wrote a little bit too much music, some would say. He might have said himself, right? I think there's this great quote from Hindemith. He was interviewed at Princeton, and someone's like, Herr Dr. Hindemith, please tell us, why do you compose music? And Hindemith responded, well, let me tell you. He said, 90% of the music I compose is shit. Oh, no. I compose for the other 10%.
Oh, that's
which is true. I mean, Hindemith is always beautifully crafted music. Always, he knew how to compose, but it's not always great music. But when it is great, it's fantastic. But a lot of it is just, do we really need a trio for flugelhorn, harmonica, and tam-tam? This kind of thing. So
I think in a lot of composers' repertoire, there's the music that lives on, and then some music, and of course you get those handful of Beethovens and Mozarts where no matter what they wrote turned into gold. But I think for the vast majority of us, there's pieces we're proud of or that worked, and then there's pieces that you kind of learned how to do it. So,
well, even Beethoven, right? Wellington's Victory.
Oh, there you go. That's true.
Right, that's a real stinker.
Yeah.
It's the viola and cello duo, which I think he himself thought was a joke. Intentionally, as it's called, with two eyeglasses obbligato. Yeah. And you hear it, it's like this is Beethoven, but he was having a very bad day. So,
fun. Yeah.
Well, let's move on to some other things. I don't know if you're a big reader or a moviegoer. Do you have a favorite author or a favorite director or movie?
Well, oh yeah. Oh, I mean, I do enjoy all the arts. Well, let's start with movies. Martin Scorsese. I mean, sure. Talk about variety of what he can do, to go from period pieces to some of the pieces that are, so current and gritty, I find it fascinating, how a film director can do something like that. So that would really be a favorite, Anyway, but I do, all the arts. I'm a big museum goer, for example, I like seeing, going to those performances, film, dance, reading. My background's Ukrainian, Polish, so Eastern European.
We share, half of my background is also Ukrainian, Polish. So.
Interesting. Well, there you go. Yeah. Yeah. There we go. Right. But I love the big Russian novels. I remember reading War and Peace the summer before my freshman year in college. It took me all summer to read it, but I got through the whole thing. And, a work like that it's just, for me, it was just all, kind of fascinating. So, yeah.
Do you still read the Russians, or has it been a while since you've returned to them? Tolstoy,
Dostoevsky, sure. Reading those, in all honesty, it's been a little while.
It's a commitment, right?
Commitment of time, absolutely. Yeah. But I did enjoy that. Yeah.
So here's a very personal question here. So what do you struggle with, or what's your deepest fear? That might be too personal. One of your deepest fears.
Well, all I can say is, right now with what we're going through with this COVID, with life turned upside down, the idea of unpredictability, I mean, I used to pride myself in always having sort of control, you know, in terms of knowing what I wanted to do. I did have opportunities, which I'm grateful for, you know, as I said, being able to go to some great schools and study with great teachers and you know, things that fell into place. But I always felt that I had control. And so the loss of control now, those first few days when COVID hit New York City, were just genuinely a nightmare, and things that you couldn't even relate to, you know. So this is pretty, it ain't gonna get much worse than this, you know. Oh, you know, of course there's tragedies throughout, you know, but you kind of,
well, if the next wave is Ebola, then we're really in trouble.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
So,
And we hope for the, you know, and we hope for the best. And
right.
then with that sort of strength and determination and relying on them that knows, you know, the scientists, the whoever is helping right now, and you know, and then you hope for the best, right? But I guess would be loss of control would be something I would never be crazy about. Yeah,
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah.
that's
All
true.
right. Well, okay. So how about, let's say you're stuck. Well, you know, this is the desert island question. You're stuck in a desert island, or you're stuck during the pandemic in your apartment and only have access to five pieces to listen to. And what would you choose?
I never get tired of the Rite of Spring.
Okay.
In terms of classical music, and I teach a class in classicism, and a lot of times the structure of my music, whatever the language that I'm using, and I call it neo-romantic / neoclassical. I mean, I use sonata allegro forms and all that traditional stuff, which I got from a teacher, Sam Adler, who appreciated those forms and stuff. But with Brahms, well, the Brahms horn trio, which I loved. It has my brass. It has the brass and a chamber piece that I think is just pure perfection.
So
And
I'll just say, just for those listening, so Rite of Spring, Stravinsky's great ballet from 1913 or so.
you're right. Yeah, it's right that exactly right at that time.
Rite of Spring for orchestra. The which one historical note, which you might know, which he premiered his first version, you know, piano four hands, because he would compose on piano. And do you know who the other pianist was at the premiere?
Debussy, right?
Debussy.
Yes.
Amazing. Stravinsky and Debussy
Hey.
premiering the Rite of Spring. I mean, it's incredible. So that's one Brahms horn trio for piano, violin, and horn, of course.
Yes. Yeah.
Real masterpiece, of course.
And then I'm just going to say, for just excitement of orchestration and stuff, the Bartók Concerto for Orchestra, which I just think is just incredible. And I don't think you can have a piece list your favorite pieces without including a Beethoven piece. So I gotta say, I'm gonna just name all the usual suspects. Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, you know, I mean, that is just pure perfection. And again, as you see, I'm emphasizing some of the classic composers, and oh, you know, I should name a Mozart piece, you know, like one of his operas. You know, I mean, you can't fault the perfection of well, any of the operas. You know, I mean, it's incredible. But let me move more contemporary as a composer.
Okay.
I named my classical.
You could say non-classical too. I don't know.
Yeah, sure. But Debussy and Ravel, they were probably the biggest influences on my music.
I wouldn't call them contemporary.
Yeah, well, when I say contemporary, I mean, you know, in the 20th, 21st century, you know, early 20th century, granted, but that kind of describes my tonality a little bit. I love
Sure.
the use of modes, I love the colors and all that stuff. And impressionistic paintings, that's my favorite stuff to look at.
You have a favorite
I've had
painter? Like Monet, Monet.
all of them, you know, and to be able to go to when I've been in Paris and to see some of the collections there that are just dazzling, you know,
Mm.
and
Well,
in
even
the Museum
really,
of Modern Art here. Oh, I'm sorry, what?
incredible impressionist collection in Philadelphia at the
Oh,
Warren
sure.
Foundation.
Yes, I've been right. It's the Museum of Art, the Philadelphia Museum of Art. Oh my gosh, yeah, I love seeing those works. And so with the Impressionist works, if I had one Impressionist between those two, um, as a pianist, I'm just going to say Ravel's Gaspard de la Nuit. I
Mm.
just think it's just so perfect and so beautiful and so imaginative, and each movement just the beauty of the first movement, the mystery of the second movement, the spectacular sound of the third movement. Yeah, I would say Ravel there.
That's
Uh-huh.
interesting because in your piece, I think it's Palisade Suite.
Yes.
I think it's the second movement in particular has that. You mentioned Ravel, and all of
Yeah.
a sudden, yeah, that clicks into place very much.
That kind of harmony.
Right. But you
Yeah.
know, it's such an interesting thing because I can hear this French influence in your music. At the same time, I would say, and you know, correct me if you disagree, of course, but your music sounds very. Uh, I would never think it's French music. It sounds very American
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
best sense. So what? That's you know what what makes it sound American and what makes French music sound French, do you think?
Okay, with American, a composer I totally forgot to mention. It's so hard to boil it down to five. But again, an influence to me, Copland.
Copeland.
And Copland and Bernstein. The American music, we have the jazz. And what is jazz that was just so specific about it? The rhythms, different kinds of more complex chords, seventh chords, ninth chords, you know. And I can flavor my music with that a little bit. No, it's not jazz, but there's a little bit of the use of some of those kinds of sounds. But when it goes to Copland's music, wow, is he an influence on so many of us? And things like Appalachian Spring, I mean, that's just pure perfection. And what is it? It's a little bit of the folk music tradition that we have in this country. And the folk, I'm sorry about all these phones ringing. Okay. but but with Copland's music, with Appalachian Spring, I mean, just the use of that traditional folk music, you know, I think that gives it an American flavor. So you mix these different spices together and you kind of end up with an American sounding music. And I think of Bernstein's music, and of course his is overtly jazz, you know, influence there. But then you listen to parts of it, like his great work with piano and orchestra. Oh yeah, Age of Anxiety, and where you have that, you know, the power and the gutsiness, but then the jazziness of it, and then sometimes the sheer beauty of it. I think the United States is like we're so many different cultures, you know, that adds up. You put them all together, and that's what we have in this country.
You know, it's interesting. You're talking about Bernstein's orchestral music, and I'd never really thought about it in this way. But I should say, started going on a tangent. I've only attended one NBA basketball game. Years ago, I went to a Nets game, and I had great seats right up near the court. And these players, they were huge. 6.5 feet, 7 feet tall, almost.
Right.
But they were so. Their touch they were so light, and they were so graceful, and kind of pirouette and this little dance, the ball just kind of rolling off their fingers into the basket. And I think when I think of Bernstein's orchestral music and his use of jazz, it's not this, I don't associate Beethoven with Beethoven symphonies with this kind of deftness, being able to turn on his feet and this kind of danciness. I mean, there'll be dance, but not this kind of dance. And there's a sense with Bernstein's orchestral music sometimes of being like, again, this 6'10" basketball player turning so lightly and just pivoting in midair.
Oh, I can see that. That's right. It's that combination of approaches, colors, a sudden shade, a twist in how you're looking and hearing something. Yeah, it's very interesting.
So, well, how about non-classical? What would you take to a desert island that's non-classical?
Well, oh boy, believe it or not, one of the very first pieces I ever wrote was a rock musical.
Okay,
And it was a rock musical when I was in 11th grade about the Vietnam War, if you can imagine that.
So what year was this?
That would have been 1971. And before I entered,
was written, I believe.
or 1970-71, what's that?
I think that's the same year Black Angels by George Crumb.
Yeah. No, I didn't, at that point, I was still in high school. I didn't know any of those composers. It really wasn't until college that I got to know those composers. But anyway, with this Apocalypse, as I said about the Vietnam War, and it was titled Apocalypse, years before Francis Ford Coppola stole my idea for Apocalypse.
You got a lawsuit there.
The titles I found out can't be copywritten. So, but anyway, but it was interesting. And
this was a musical.
A rock musical. Yeah.
What was it? Was it about? I assume there was no romance at the heart of it.
No, it was loosely based on, there were a lot of individual scenes. If you remember, those were the days, oh gosh, some of the names of the pieces, Pray for Peace was one of them. I mean, this was a certain type of thing happening in folk music too. The folk music, rock music, they're all kind of blended together a little bit in those days. And so the sound of it was very much purely like rock music. And, in which I found out some of that rock music, now that I'm a music professor, it's modes and it's modal scales that still creeps its way into my music. And some people listen to it and they say, well, that almost sounds like popular music, And well, yeah, that's part of my background too. And that's, as I say, the multiculturalism and influences of composers of our time. Yeah.
Well, okay, so finally, let's. I'm going to put a clip in of Western Fanfare.
Great.
Western Fanfare, a brass quintet written, I think, around 2011.
Yes.
And just to give people an idea of what they're missing this summer.
Yeah, but next summer or at some future time, it's going to happen for sure.
Back in 2021. Not back. We'll have you live in 2021 to write for tuba and string quartet. But tell me a little about Western Fanfare.
Sure. With Western Fanfare, I wrote that for the Music Academy of the West. They wanted a piece that could be that they could play several times during their summer festival. And so they would like to open their festival with that piece. And so I had two versions of it, one for a full brass orchestra, and then I made a version for brass quintet. And, but that's what that piece is about. And as a fanfare, you know, and with brass instruments, I wanted something exciting, heroic, and not just heroic, which brass, you know, they can do that great, but I wanted some lyrical passages too. And so you have the melodies, like the piece I'm writing with for Newburyport was the, you know, to explore the beautiful melodies that the tuba can sing out, you know, and give the chance for the tuba to not just provide, you know, the oomph and the richness of the dark low colors, but no, let the tuba sing too. And so that's, you know, that's my goal, you know, with this piece, and just to show that, oh, yes, it's a low instrument, but to flatter the sound of the instrument, you encourage those low sounds, but then you show the variety of what the instrument can do. Yeah. Right. And oh boy, and listening to recordings of Scott Devereaux, who is performing this, you know, whoa, you hear his playing and you hear that beauty of his, you know, when he sings those resonant passages, and
it's got something else.
And oh yeah, exactly. So yeah, so that's, can I tell one quick other story?
Yes, please.
I went to the very first, you know, all these instruments have their own conventions. Like there's an International Viola Congress, right?
I know, even violas have a convention.
Right, yeah. So virtually all the instruments have something like this. And one of the very first ones was back in the early 70s. And I was there with a group from Eastman. This was 1973. And it was—
This is for which
tuba euphonium.
Tuba euphonium.
There we go. And so there we have a convention of all these tuba euphonium players playing all this music. It was in Indiana University.
Then you bring your own keg, or are they provided? I should say brass players have a reputation for being able to...
oh, for sure. Absolutely. But but if you can imagine, and there was about 400 tuba players there from all over the world, and we're talking big names, Roger Bobo, I mean, principals of Philadelphia Orchestra, Cleveland Orchestra, you know, they were all there, you know. And there was one, okay, this is maybe this won't make the cut, but I do have to tell you this story. It's just so funny. They ended the festival, they were at a big tuba ensemble made up of all these superstar tuba players on the stage. And they ended with the dum-ba-dum, bum-ba-dum, you know, the great famous the great brass fanfare, you know, that's in March, that has the famous piccolo solo, right?
From like, that one? Or,
yes.
Susan?
Yes. What is that? I just suddenly forgot the name.
All I can think of is "Be kind to your web-footed friends."
Okay, we'll have to insert that.
Okay, that will be another link in with the great, with the great piccolo solo. I know exactly.
But I have to tell you, but it's a famous piccolo solo. Right. Well, they had one piccolo player on stage with these 16 or 20 tuba players that were playing, and it was a great arrangement, you know. And it's time for the piccolo solo. So the piccolo player goes up to the microphone, right? And time for her solo, and she goes to play. And you know what you hear? You hear all the tuba players going, right? And through the microphone, you hear the piccolo player going, toot, 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 toot.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
It was brilliant.
Right. So they turned it on its head.
Yeah, just to prove that that instrument can do a million things.
There we go. Well, Scott, this summer was supposed to, and next summer we'll be doing Flight of the Bumblebee.
There you go. Right.
And if we can fit it in, we'll do, I think summer, or at least a movement of summer from the Four Seasons for tuba.
Right.
So well, he can do anything. He'll be doing the Penderecki solo, and then
very famous, very famous. And there's a piece that's so colorful and wild. Yeah.
And then the climax of the festival will be the world premiere of your tuba quintet.
All right. Well, I'm very excited about that.
Well, Eric, this has been great. It's so nice to talk to you. Usually we just pass each other in the hallway at Juilliard or in the lobby.
Oh, right.
And of course, I heard your beautiful Fanfare, I think, premiered, what was it, a convocation at Juilliard last year? Or maybe at graduation or something.
Right. They've done a couple of my works there over the years. Yeah.
So, well, look, stay safe and keep on writing, I guess.
You bet. It's such a pleasure to meet you over the internet like this. And I look forward to meeting you in person.
Well, we have met a few times, just always in the hallway.
Yeah, but always running around, but getting together to be at your festival. Can't wait. Yeah.
Okay, Eric. Well, good talking to you. Thank you so much.
Here. Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.